We say things like, maybe later, perhaps another time, or I'll see you tomorrow. But for some of us, there won't be a tomorrow. Listen as your worst nightmares come to life. These nightmares have become someone's reality. My name is Justin Crowley, and this is The Murder Project. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of The Murder Project. This is the debrief episode on The Outsiders, the murder of Brian Deneke. If you're new to the podcast, the debrief is where I sit down with my good friend and former police officer, Mike Smith, to discuss the cases further. In the debrief, we'll discuss the case from both sides of the aisle, theories that we might have, and anything we think needs a second look. The debrief is an unscripted and off-the-cuff commentary about the cases that we are currently covering. The hope of the debrief is to break the cases down further, but in a relaxed environment with the true crime we love and also some laughter. So let's get the episode started. How you doing, my man, Mike Smith?
I'm good, buddy.
Good.
Yeah, I'm ready to talk about this because I actually heard about this before I'd ever even come to Amarillo, and we'll cover that.
Yeah, that's crazy. So before we get the episode started, I just want to issue a few corrections from the last episode. If you looked at any of the details on Facebook or whatever platform you listen on, so originally when I was recording the episode, it was one of those situations where I couldn't have had any more disturbances while this was going on. I had to stop and then start again about 5 times. And at the very beginning of the podcast, when I straight out of the gate, someone kept ringing my doorbell. And then I got up to try to figure out what was going on. And I hooked my foot around my headphone cords and I ripped my Focusrite deal off it was like one of those things where like every time I came back, I was like, man, where was that? But that's not necessarily an excuse for what happened. But when I was looking down at my notes, I looked over and saw the name Mike, and I assumed that, and I know that Brian's brother's name is Jason. So in the episode, I said that his brother Mike, but that was when it was talking about his mom and Brian's mom and dad. Mm-hmm. Brian's dad is named Mike. Dustin Camp's dad's also named Mike. Your name's Mike.
That's true.
Yeah.
These are all facts.
A lot of Mikes going on. Mm-hmm. So Brian's brother's name is Jason, not Mike. Mm-hmm. Mike is actually his dad. And then we have the other correction where I called one of the girls Elise, and it's Elsie. Mm-hmm. And so that was just one of those, just glancing down at my notes, so I apologize for that. So we're going to try to make up for that in the debrief. I know that sometimes when I'm doing these episodes, everything's just, it's unscripted, and we want to do that. That's on purpose.
Of course.
We have our notes, but we don't want to read a script because that comes off to me as not really genuine when you're talking about cases. And so when Mike and I set up the podcast, we're like, hey, we don't want to do a script. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, when you're in there freestyling, you can have a few errors, and
sure can.
I apologize for that, but we try to correct them when we can. And I had someone that reached out to me and was like, hey, this is not a huge deal, but you referred to Brian's brother as Mike and his name was Jason. And I was like, I did? And then I went back and listened to the episode. I was like, oh, man. So I apologize about that. But also I want to mention that on Facebook now, if you know someone that listens to podcasts or doesn't listen to podcasts for that matter because they don't have the platforms, maybe they got an Android phone or say they don't want to get on Spotify, they don't want to download anything. Everybody usually has Facebook at least. And so Facebook now has a integration with your podcast provider, us. Mm-hmm. So we use Buzzsprout. And so I can attach our RSS feed to Facebook now. And so if you go to the Murder Project page, and we try to share this on there, but every time we upload a episode now, it will appear on Facebook, and you can download. You don't even have to download. You can listen to the episode straight from Facebook, and it'll stream in the background. So you can click on it, and basically what you'll do is if you know anybody that wants to listen to it, or if you know somebody that you'd like to refer the podcast to, and they don't have any of these platforms to listen on, if you go to our Murder Project page, And then up there where it has like photos, videos, community, all this, if you scroll through, you'll see podcasts. If you click on podcasts, every single episode we've ever recorded is in there now.
That's awesome.
So if you click play on there, you can also then hit the down arrow and then it'll go into the background and you can resume like scrolling on Facebook. You can close Facebook out and get in other apps and it'll continue to play in the background. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So really, this is just a great chance for you to share it. Can you tag people in it?
Yep. You can share the episodes. You can tag people in the episodes.
Awesome.
You can do anything with it. Like it's totally, and you can even go in there and clip things out of it. The listeners, you can clip stuff out of it and share it with your friends. You can share the whole thing with your friends. You can tag people in the post. You can do anything. Yeah, it's
what a great feature.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So if you're a listener of the podcast, please help us out with that because it really helped get our name out there, and it's absolutely free to do it. There's no sponsors, no ads, no nothing like that. So
and no excuses.
No excuses. So all right, well I guess that's my spill for this part. Let's go ahead and dive into this case, and I think it was a really important one for me because I know it affected a lot of people in Amarillo, people that I know specifically, and there was a lot of information I was getting on this that is either from one side or the other, and that's one of the things I talked about in the part one is that it's crazy that now
even still it's very divisive.
Yeah, I mean people that I've talked to that are in their 40s, their mid 40s, that are still like, well, these kids, and you can insert whichever group, did something wrong. Or, the punks had it coming because they acted a certain way. Or the jocks got away with murder because they were in this point of society, this placement of society. And it's crazy to me that still to this day, there's such tension based off of this case. And so we don't really want to look at it from that point of view. We really want to try to tell you why we think something like this happened and what the aftermath of it all was, because it was quite tragic for a lot of people that were involved.
It is. Either way, this is a immature, ridiculous beef between a bunch of high school kids that resulted in somebody getting ran over for no reason.
No reason at all.
This isn't Gangs of New York where they're meeting at the Four Corners to fight for dominance over the city. Yeah. No, this is just a bunch of kids trying to act like they're tough, and somebody died from it, and it's so stupid.
Basically made up controversies that were just, it's kind of like the whole thing was a fabrication of course, of problems.
Yeah, it was like, oh, these guys are really asking for it because they have mohawks and spiky metal studs on their leather jackets. I guess that means that he thinks he's tough.
Yeah, I better go over there and give him the what for.
Exactly. It's so dumb. And it's exactly the kind of thing that, especially in Western culture, that people like to wield like a sword or shield, depending on what they're doing. It's just somebody expressing themselves. It's not a threat to you. Because you wear your polo shirt with your collar popped and you got your white frosted tips.
The white frosted tips, you know it.
And you think you're cooler than this other kid that just likes punk music. It's really important to point out at this moment that punks, rockers, metalheads, it was not new in 1997.
No.
They weren't some fringe part of society where rebels hung out. Punks, rockers, metalheads, all sorts of people that fall into those tropes, they've been around since the 60s, 70s. And it's not that uncommon, but for some reason, people like to look back on Amarillo in the late 90s, the mid to late 90s, like it was the footloose town. Yeah. And I can promise you it was not.
Yeah.
It was a little smaller back then. But by no means was it a small city. It's got a small town feel. I'd even say that because that's why I like living here. I'm not from here. I'm an import. But it's not a small town. There are lots of people here. It's very wide. I believe it's bigger now, but at one point, just the part of Amarillo that borders I-40 was 13 miles. That's not a little bit of space.
No.
Just the part of Amarillo that borders I-40. That's 13 miles across. It's 11 or 13.
Yeah.
Now I'm second guessing myself.
Don't do that.
But it's not a little town. There are lots of people here and lots of different cultures and ethnicities and so on. And to think that back then, these obviously wise beyond their years students from, what was it, Tascosa and Emerald High, right?
Right.
Were just like, these people look different, so I don't like them anymore. As if teenagers in high school need any other reason to pick on each other, because as we discussed in other episodes, kids in school are the worst.
Yeah, they are.
They'll pick on you for anything.
Yep, and we covered that in the Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Stanky case.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't heard that one, go back and listen to it, because it was a really good one. I think.
It is a really good one. Tragic, disgusting,
yep.
And I can't believe that she still gets to be free.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to it.
Go listen now. Not gonna ask again.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and one of the crazy things I think that still kind of goes on with this is that the rivalry between Amarillo High and Tascosa,
mm-hmm.
and the deal that they still do to this day, but Hell Week is what they called it.
Yeah. Didn't that just go by?
Yeah. They call it Spirit Week now.
Well, it does sound, it does roll off the tongue nicer.
Yeah. So you can expect a lot of
Let's leave
drama.
Hell Week for the SEALs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there is a lot of drama between the two schools and a lot of things that happen. And I noticed whenever I was mowing one of my yards the other day that all the kids get their houses wrapped, and like there's still like this feud between the two schools where it's like, our school's better than your school. And, but we live in the same town, so now we have to put our letter jackets on and stand tall and represent a school that A, you probably don't really even care about, and B, after you leave, you're not going to think about it for 15 years.
Yeah.
Until you if you come back to this area and maybe you have kids that go to the school, or something like that. But it's just weird. It's a weird deal.
On the flip side of that opinion, I worked the South Side for a couple of years when I worked at the PD, and I had to deal with a lot of that fallout.
Oh, yeah.
And this might be controversial to say, but the parents were just as willing to be involved.
Yes, they are.
So I get called for a vandalism where this car got just blasted with eggs.
Oh, yeah, that's another big one.
Coated. I'm talking coated, but it sat for the weekend,
Mm.
which, if you don't know, when eggs break down, they become very acidic.
Yep.
And they'll peel your paint.
Yeah.
And this car was probably wearing 30 eggs. I mean, it was coated top to bottom. Every side of the car that could be hit with an egg was hit. There was eggshells just everywhere. And they knew who did it, and they wanted to press charges, but like the kids, like the young teenager did, because it was their car. But the parents were like, nah, man, it's just the cost of doing business. What you do, they send one of yours to the hospital, you send 6 of theirs to the morgue. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
I don't think it's worth this. He egged a car. Like, just have him wash it.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually had some kids that when I was still on patrol, I was leaving my house, and a few blocks over, I'm driving at it, and this goes back to me always finding stuff as I'm going to her, but I'm driving back out of my neighborhood,
mm-hmm.
and I see these kids, and they're running to a car that's parked on a little side street. And so as they're running up, I roll my window down, and I was like, "What y'all doing?" And they're like, "Oh, nothing." And I was like, why are y'all running over here to your car? And the guy's like, "Oh, we just left a friend's house." And I was like, "Where at?" And he's like, "It's like 3 or 4 houses down over there." And I was like, "So why are you parked over here?" And he's like, well, because I'm like, let's everybody hold up for just a second.
Exactly.
I put my car in park. I get out. I walk to the end of the street, and I look down there, man, and it's just streamers of just toilet paper and stuff. I mean, it's just everywhere. And I'm like, you guys wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would y'all? And they're like, we got, and I was like, you with the backpack, let me ask you a question. Is there going to be toilet paper in your backpack? And the girl's like, I don't think so. And I was like, because you used it all? And she's like, pretty much. And I'm like, yeah, okay, everybody come over here. Let's step over here. And I was like, here's what we're going to do.
That's so fun.
We're going to walk up, and we're going to knock on the door to this house.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are going to volunteer to come over here in the morning and clean all this up for him, because you guys are just such good people. And they're like, please don't make us do that, because that kid that lives in that house wrapped our house.
Yep.
last night, or whatever. And I'm like, I understand what you're saying, but I also just happened to stumble across this and see you guys do that. So let's go talk to him. So I walked up and knocked on the door, and the guy answered it. And he looks out and he's like, holy cow. And I was like, yeah, man, looks like someone wrapped your house. And he's like, these be the kids that did it? And I was like, well, sir, I can't really say that for sure, but I can tell you this. These kids volunteered to come clean your house up in the morning. Isn't that awesome? And he goes, sounds good. And he just walked in.
I mean, I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with friendly rivalry.
Yeah.
Or what I will say is friendly rivalry.
Yeah, that was innocent. I'm not.
Yeah.
We wrapped houses when I was a kid, and we had a great time, and we used to always get each other back and do a bunch of stuff. It was a good time. I'm not saying that I was against that at all.
No, I'm just saying that a lot of times the parents are just as culpable, because I've met many parents, and I know lots of like my friends and their acquaintances who are, went to school at either Tascosa or Amarillo High, and still somehow in their late 30s still feel the same way.
Yeah.
They're like, blow, San, blow, yankety yank, go Reb. And I'm like, I don't understand. You're 37.
Yeah. And I can get it if you lived here your whole life, I guess. But I don't live in the town that I grew up in. So to me, like, I don't really have any affiliation with anything. And
of course,
so, and it's to me, like, it's fine as long as it's in a safe manner, as long as everybody's having fun. But it's definitely it's a strong bond.
It is, yeah. And so there's room on either side to say that it's immature and stupid, and it's also part of growing up around here. But it's not necessarily what happened in this particular case.
Yeah.
Because even if you look it up, it's called the death of Brian Deneke.
Mm-hmm.
And not the murder.
Yep.
And we'll get to that, because fundamentally, I have an issue with that.
Yeah. And that's why, in my opinion, the reason I labeled it the way that I did is because you'll realize what my take is on that as we get along. So
of course
we kind of side skirted that whole front deal for a second, but so Brian Deneke was a student at Amarillo High, and he was, like I mentioned in the part one, he was kind of into dance, into Boy Scouts, and he was in Boy Scouts for a while, I think up until he was like 12 or 13 years old. And he was he had already picked up skateboarding from his older brother, Jason. And so he was kind of getting into that scene while still having some of his youth attached, even though he's still a youth, but the things he did when he was a younger child attached to. And so he's kind of living kind of two sides of that lifestyle. And he decides to go full into the kind of skater punk scene. And I think this is where he starts, all of the bullying and all the things start happening for him. And it's talked about pretty extensively. And I'm going to reference some material that I found. I didn't reference this in the first podcast because I didn't have it, but Texas Monthly did a really good article about this. Looks like in November of 1999. So just a couple years after this whole thing had kind of went down. Pamela Koloff was the author of this, and like I said, it's from the Texas Monthly. So I'll reference a few things from there, but this is kind of where in Brian's life, he is experiencing not only a lot of different changes in his life, but he's also kind of changed his appearance. They talk about, how he ditched his regular clothes, which would, I don't know exactly what that would be. Just say t-shirt and jeans.
Sure. And
now he's kind of wearing the black t-shirts, the band t-shirts, the safety pins, the leather jackets. He's got a dog collar. He's got like a 12-inch mohawk that he gels up, so it's like this huge, mohawk. And
I mean, that's legit.
Yeah. To me, I was like, man, that's pretty awesome. I'd love to be able to.
That's dedicated.
And I wish I could do it to this day, but I don't have enough hair to pull that off. So
samesies.
Yeah. So that's something we could look back on and say, you know what? While we had the hair, we maybe should have tried it.
Sure.
we can't now. But he gets into it. There's a lot of talk about, and that's where I feel like there's not a lot of things that I found in the research that points that the punks were going and targeting the jocks. And then another aspect we had in here, which I didn't point out, is that they pointed out in the article was the kickers. You know, you got the Cowboys, and you know they're mixed in there somewhere too, and not specifically in this story, but that was one of the things that they talked about was the main hangouts could be you could see punks, jocks, and kickers all kind of meshed in the same,
right?
You know, mashed up in the same area, but I didn't really see where these kids were going out specifically and attacking the jocks, that it was more of a one-sided type incident. Not to say that that is exactly true. Not to say, and I even mentioned, like, I'm sure that they got their licks in, you know, when they could.
Exactly.
Because this is a ongoing rivalry between these two groups. But where I think a lot changed for him was the fact that at school, the punks, they would get taunted. They would be spit on in the hallways.
Yeah.
You know, they would get beat up in the bathroom. They would get chased home from school. And like, that's one of the things they talked about with Brian is like, he would ride his skateboard home because he didn't have a car.
Yeah.
And people would chase him. They'd throw beer bottles at him. They'd pretend that they were going to run him over. They would pull their trucks up next to him and jump out and beat him up. And it reminded me of this scene from like Dazed and Confused, you know, when they're like pulling up in trucks and like paddling everybody and doing all this. And so over time, that can change a man or woman.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a lot of like rage that's going to build up because you're not doing anything more than likely to make this happen to you.
Yeah, to provoke an assault on you.
Yeah, you're not provoking anyone. They're just doing it because they think it's cool in their own little clique.
And remember, folks, if we talk about like the trash talk that goes on at school, words alone can't provoke as far as the law goes.
That's right.
So if kids are trash talking each other or adults are trash talking each other and say, well, this guy lipped off, so I punched him in the mouth. You can't do that. That's called assault.
Yeah, it's called assault.
So if these kids are beefing with each other at school and calling each other names, that doesn't mean that after school you can like team up with your buddies and just go beat the crap out of them.
Yeah. I mean, for Christ's sakes, the kids' nicknames were Fist, Magnet, and Punch. He doesn't sound like the aggressor to me.
Yeah, and that's why I said on the other side, his friends called him Sunshine because he was always smiling and he was very charismatic. And so you have one group of people that call him Sunshine and the other group of people that call him Punch and Fist Magnet because people just beat him up all the time.
And that's the part that kind of struck me when I listened to the first episode and in the research that I looked into. You don't get nicknames like that because you're the one doing the punching.
Yeah.
You're not the Fist Magnet because you're throwing them dukes. You're getting them thrown at you.
Yeah, you're not Bruiser.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, he was going through a lot.
Yeah.
And you know what? From the sound of it, he was making the most of it. And just because he was part of a, what was the phrase you were looking for? Because he was a part of a marginalized part of
he was in a marginalized group in his school and in his community.
Right.
And so for that, and I can also see, like, going back to what you're saying, I can also see some of the parents that were probably been like, don't hang out with those kids.
Yeah.
Those kids are bad. Go look at like the video montages of people skateboarding and just see the type of people that are just screaming at these people that are just skateboarding.
Yeah.
I feel like those are the kind of parents that were telling their kids, and kids are very impressionable. It doesn't matter. And as a parent, you imprint on your children even when you don't think that you're doing it.
Absolutely.
And they notice everything. And if you're telling your children these are bad kids without having any further information aside from the way that they look, your children are also going to think to themselves, those are bad kids. Those are the enemy. I don't want to be like those kids. I don't want to associate with those kids. And so then you have this tension.
That's right. Yeah.
That's built up that was not even created by the kids themselves.
That's right. Like they said, we're all a product of our raising. It doesn't matter how it's done.
Yeah.
If you're raised around somebody that doesn't like, let's say, another culture or ethnicity, you're more than likely going to grow up feeling the same way because that's what you were around growing up.
Yeah.
You know?
And then you, as a young adult or as a teenager, as a child, you are making decisions that are not only based on probably bad information, but you don't have the capacity to rationalize with what you're doing because of your age and because your brain's not fully developed until you're 25. And so, which we might have done some damage in that area because, but,
I mean,
whatever. But it's it got these kids into a state of they were having to go around in groups because they were being assaulted at every single place that they went.
Right.
And then that also pushes them to the further fringes of this area because they have to go and they have to hang out in areas where they might not get beat up or might not even have to worry about that. And one of the places that I mentioned in the first episode that they hung out with,
the 8th Street house.
Yeah, which I didn't mention the name, but yeah, it's the 8th Street house is, I believe, the name of one of the places that they hung out at. And from what I understand, it was a pretty run down building, and it's not in a good area. But they'd all meet up together. And I also saw this one place called the Egg, but I don't know how that kind of kind of ties into the story, but they would go there and they would hang out and they'd have bands and they'd kind of get to be in their own element and they'd have their, show their art, and they could, the building was tagged and different kinds of things. But then you'd also have these areas where these two sides would cross paths. And one of those places ended up being the IHOP
at I-40 and Western. Yeah.
Over on Western. So Brian ended up dropping out of high school because of all the things that were happening. And from what I understand, he was a really smart kid. He got his GED immediately after he dropped out of high school. And this is whenever he decides to leave Amarillo.
Take a little sabbatical.
Yeah, take a little sabbatical, go check out the East Coast. And, that may be like one of those things where you're trying to find yourself and maybe try to cross into areas that were more accepting of your lifestyle.
Sure.
And so he was going and kind of checking all that out. But he's also still very young, and he is, he doesn't have steady work, and, doesn't really have a place to live, doesn't really have his feet underneath him, where I don't think he got a solid crack at exploring that different type of, or exploring that adventure, because we know it only lasted for 4 months. And I'm sure he got to see a lot of different things and got to do a lot of different things, but ultimately he ends up back in Amarillo.
Right.
And this is whenever he starts working with Stanley Marsh 3, and he starts doing all the starts doing the sign work and things like that, putting signs in people's yard, which when you moved to Amarillo, did you think the same thing I did?
I thought it was incredibly bizarre.
Yeah, they had, I remember I saw one that had the Robert Earl Keen, The Road Goes On Forever. And then I remember seeing one that had like, The Road Doesn't Stop Here or something like that. And, Amarillo, 160,000. What was the saying? It has like 160,000 good people and a few old sore heads or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's close.
It was something. I'm not getting those exactly right because I'm just trying to remember it from memory, but there were just all these wild signs everywhere. And I remember when I moved here, I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And then they told me about it, and I was like, oh yeah, the Cadillac Ranch, the signs, the Alphabet Soup car. Did you ever see that one? Did you ever see the Alphabet Soup Suburban?
I don't think so.
The legs out on I-27. Like all these different things. It was really cool just to kind of see all that. And I thought it was kind of neat.
I had to have the same conversation when I first moved here, which is in 2009.
Yeah.
And I would occasionally see something like that. I'm like, what is with this? It's so weird. Of course, I come from a very different part of America,
Yeah.
Very rural parts of the Pacific Northwest. So I was like, what in the heck is all of this?
What is going on here?
Yeah. They're like, so you're telling me some guy just comes and knocks on your door and says, hey, we'll give you a couple ducats and we put this weird sign in your yard? And you're like, sounds like a plan.
Yeah. And that's what Brian did.
Right.
He would go around and canvass neighborhoods and ask people if he could put signs in their yard. And from what some people said, and in the research I did, they talked about how you would have this kid that was dressed, like he was dressed with this mohawk walking up and knocking on doors, but that he could instantly get people to like him. And before you know it, like, boom, they're putting a sign up in these people's, flower bed. And so that was that was one of the things he did when he moved back to Amarillo to get money. And like I mentioned, Stanley Marsh had a little bit of controversy around him.
A little bit?
A lot of it. But I do know one thing is that I did hear that he did give a lot of like underprivileged kids work to do. He'd give them work. He'd give them a place to hang out with. I was going to say feel safe, but some of that may...
Let's dodge that one.
Yeah, let's dodge that one. But it's at least it was an availability for some of them to earn some income.
Absolutely. And for what good it did, I'm glad. And that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, that's where we'll leave that one. And to me, when you're kind of getting into the lead up of the night, December 12th, when Brian actually dies, it's kind of crazy because I noticed that there is a lot of written articles about this. There's the movie Bomb City. So if you look at kind of like the lead up to everything that happened on December 6th and then moving into the final events that happened on December 12th, it's kind of a weird buildup because, like, for me, I know there's a lot of articles that have been written about this story. There's the movie Bomb City that they did, and I didn't reference anything in this based off of Bomb City because it is a movie.
Right.
And
it's fictionalized.
So they don't have to be exactly accurate in everything they're doing in portraying the story. So I didn't use anything for that, but from what I understand, it's a good movie. The only thing that I've heard as far as negative reviews is that they don't really put a whole lot of detail on who the characters are, so it gets kind of confusing as you're trying to follow along, like who this person is or that person is or whatever. But I had the opportunity to meet one of the guys that was involved in this whole thing back in 2006 or 2007, kind of just on a whim. And I asked him about a tattoo that he had on his arm. And it looked like a city that was burning. And there's like people on it. It's been a long time since I saw the tattoo. But I remember asking the guy, I was like, hey, what's up with the tattoo? And he's like, oh, this was his depiction of the night that the city burned. And I almost wanted to use that in the title, but I thought it would be confusing to people that didn't understand the whole story.
Right.
So, and they are classified, in my opinion, as what we would consider outsiders.
Sure.
And so that's why I ended up using that title with the Brian Deneke murder. But so I asked him, I said, well, what's up with the tattoo? And then he tells me the story.
Yeah.
And the guy that I was talking to was Chris Oles, who is one of the people that was with Brian the night that he died.
Right. Yeah.
And he was friends with Brian, close friends with him and his brother Jason, and hung out with them. And so he told me the story about this, and I was like, I remember getting to the end of it, and I was like, wait, what? And then because he told me the whole outcome of the whole thing with the probation, and then, and I was like, that is wild. And I remember talking to the guy and thinking to myself, this is like one of the nicest guys that I've met. And I know that other people might have a different opinion of him as other people have opinions about me, you know? And, that's why I saw a quote one time where it said, like, everybody has two different sides, and I show you the side that it's like a kind of reflective type deal where, like, you get the part of me that I'm either the nice guy or the a-hole. And the way that you treat me is,
of course,
is what side you get.
Yeah. And it's also very popular for, like, Facebook posts. Yes,
that's where I saw it.
People like to really broadcast that stuff,
yeah. But I remember talking to Chris, and I was thinking to myself, man, this he seems like a really nice guy, really cool guy. And then he tells me about it because one of the things that was crazy is that he says that Dustin actually clipped him when he was driving through the parking lot on his way. It was either before the turnaround or on his way to run over Brian. And he's like, he actually hit me with his car, and I remember hearing the story, and I was like, golly. And then all these years later, 15 years later, and now we're sitting here talking about it, and it's crazy because there's a lot of like I've already said, there's a lot of different sides to it, and the names kind of get confused depending on who you talk to and like who was there, and it's not unlikely for people to include themselves into stories after they've already happened.
Sure. And,
it's like one of those things where now I feel like it's so far down the road that a lot of people now say, like, oh, yeah, so-and-so, oh, my friend so-and-so was there.
Yeah.
And maybe they weren't, maybe they were. But I know for a fact that Chris was. And so I also know that on December 6th, which is the night at the IHOP, and he was there with another guy named John King, and now I know that Brian was not there. And so there was some kind of back and forth where maybe he was around, maybe he wasn't around, but I know that he wasn't there.
Right.
And so you have this situation where I believe Chris and John were at the IHOP, and that seemed to be like one of their kind of normal hangouts. And some of the jocks showed up, and this is one of the things that I wanted to discuss in this episode was that they were called the White Hats.
That's right, yeah. And when I heard this story originally, that's how they were referred to me, and so I needed that person to elaborate what that even meant. And so what they told me is that a lot of like the jock crowd, they affiliated themselves in this little clique, gang, whatever you want to call it, because that's how it was kind of referred to me, was they were the White Hats. So they wore like plain white ball caps to identify each other.
Yeah, and that's how they would know like who was on their team, I guess.
Yeah.
And so you have this incident with the White Hats, and they're showing up to the IHOP, and Dustin is there at this time. And so he's kind of one of the guys that are with the jocks. And one of the things that I found interesting about Dustin is that he was on kind of the edge of what he wasn't a rich kid. He wasn't a poor kid, to say it that way. He was kind of like right in the middle.
Right.
And he wanted so bad to be with a certain group of people that I feel like that's kind of what influenced his decisions. And he had that 1983 Cadillac, which at this time's 15 years old.
Yeah.
And he kind of got some flack for that because he was driving an old Caddy. And in my mind, I'm picturing like one of those boats.
Just a yacht.
You know, just a big old boat, you know. And one of the interesting things that I found was that he was a junior in high school. He was into football, like one of his coaches stated 110%, but he was very forgettable in the fact that a lot of people had a hard time from the coaching staff of even remembering kind of who he was before all this incident happened.
Right.
Because one of the things that I think kind of helps fuel this is that he was a junior in high school, still on the JV team.
Right.
And all of his buddies that he kind of ran with had already made it to the varsity team. And it is unlikely to hear about in towns the size of Amarillo, freshmen, especially, or sophomores being on the varsity team. You have to be pretty good.
You'd have to be a big unit.
Yeah. Where I'm from, that's not so much. You know, you got to build them teams. So if you got to throw a few freshmen on there or whatever, then, or sophomores, that's what you do. But even in the bigger towns, you know, being a junior and going to the varsity team, whether it's basketball, football, whatever, that's pretty commonplace.
Yeah.
But for Dustin, he was left on the JV team. And so he
didn't make the cut.
He didn't make the cut. And so I think that also cut his ego a little bit. And he was trying harder to figure out how he can.
Yeah. Showing off.
Yep.
Trying to inflate himself.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Make up for that shortcoming. Sure. And that sounds exactly like what a teenager would do.
Yes.
We've all done it in our own ways. High school does that to you.
Yeah. And so you have, in my opinion, you have a group of kids who are talking poorly about another group of kids. And so in Dustin's eyes, he sees this opportunity to elevate himself in the group, to look at, you know, to his friends and say, hey, I know that if I do something to these kids, whether it's fighting or whatever the scenario, that makes me look cool.
Yeah.
That puts me...
They all see me doing this. They see me showboating.
Yeah.
And that'll be memorable.
Yeah, because he wanted so badly to be a part of this group. And even though they allowed him to hang out with them, he wasn't. He wasn't in all the way.
Right. He was just a proxy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So they show up to the IHOP. Chris and John are there. I know that for sure. I don't know if there are any other people that could have been there, but they have some sort of a verbal altercation inside, I believe is the way the story went. And then that carried over to outside. And at some point, because I know the Western Plaza parking lot, which I drove by there yesterday, and I drive by there fairly often.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I don't ever look over there.
Right.
So in the first episode, I'm like, yeah, that parking lot's still just exactly kind of the way it. And I mentioned that they'd added some buildings, but one of the things I forgot about is that right where probably all this happened, there's like one of those pop-up ER places.
Yep.
And so now it's not exactly the way that it was. There's a gas station right there too.
Yeah. And heck, even when I first moved here in 2009, there was like the frontage road restaurants and stuff, but there wasn't nothing else.
Yeah, there was nothing over there.
Big open parking lot.
Empty parking lot where we used to go get down at Graham Central Station and sing drunk karaoke and stuff, you know? And
that sounds like a great time.
yeah, it was in the good old days. But after they dozed Western Plaza, there was nothing over there for a long time. And now I drove back over there and actually paid attention to what is there, and it's pretty full.
Yeah.
It's pretty full spot.
It's good real estate.
Yeah, that parking lot in general where they would have been hanging out at is still sort of there. I mean, that's all. I mean,
but there's like the Murphys, the ER.
There's that shopping center that used to have the orange leaf yogurt place in it.
The lemongrasses.
I think it went out of business, but it was a good spot. But I don't know if this happened in the IHOP parking lot, because earlier it was funny because I said Waffle House and then I said, oh yeah, no, that was IHOP. But strangely enough, there's a IHOP and a Waffle House in the same parking lot.
Yeah, they're right next to each other. Yeah,
right
just
next
kitty
to each
corner.
other.
Yeah,
yeah, and it's a smart move because I've gone up to that IHOP before and walked in and they're like 30-minute wait, and I've just walked out the door and walked next door and sat down at IHOP, and I'm like, this will do.
Sat down at Waffle House. Who's waiting 30 minutes at Waffle House, man?
No, I'm saying at IHOP.
Well, I know, but then you said IHOP again.
Oh, sorry, Waffle House. Yes,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
That's what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
so I walked across the Waffle House and sat down.
Let me tell you,
my
only time you have a 30
works
minute
faster than my mouth does.
The only time you have a 30-minute wait at Waffle House is at 2:30 in the morning on a weekend.
If it's breakfast time, you're good. You're good to go.
It's when the bar's empty out, and you're like, oh man, let's go get some Waffle House, and you get in there, and that parking lot is packed.
Yeah, and then you get hit with the Hoos Deuce.
Yeah, you do.
The first time I heard that, my buddy Paul that lives up in New Jersey, shout out to Paul, and my buddy Ryan and Frank and several other guys, we used to go there all the time, but it's like it never fails. You eat that food, and then stomach cramps are approaching rapidly.
Yeah, you're going to get it.
You're going to get it. The chocolate chip waffle is so good.
It is so good. Yeah. And that's what they rely on.
They do. It's a good place.
Just something about the way those cigarette ashes sprinkle them eggs.
Yeah. There's something about going to a place where they still cook your breakfast with someone who's actively smoking a cigarette while they're cooking your breakfast. And it's just so good. I don't know, but
yeah,
it's great.
It is.
But they have a altercation that spills over into outside, and Dustin does this same move that we'll see later, where he gets in his caddy and he circles through the parking lot and tries to run the guys over.
Yeah.
And kind of scatters them. I don't know if in this situation he's just trying to scare somebody or whatever, but John uses something that he has, which was a police baton, I believe is what they said.
A baton of some kind.
Yeah, a baton of some sort, and he throws it against his windshield and smashes his windshield. And then later on, the jocks would say, no, that never happened. And the punk crowd would say, yes, that did happen. And that's what led up to the following Friday, because this is on a Saturday, and this is December 6th. And then 6 days later, on the Friday, that's when everything kind of comes to a head. And the reason why they believe that this incident actually happened is because there were rumors kind of circulating through the high school crowds that there was going to be this big fight at the Western Plaza parking lot between the punks and the jocks in retaliation for this event that happened the weekend before.
Yeah, and it says in some places, and even on like the Wikipedia and stuff, it'll say that this is around 11 p.m. 11 p.m.
Yeah.
After a night of heavy drinking.
Yeah.
So all these teens are out doing what teens do on a Friday night. And then they're like, oh, wait, we're beefing with these dudes. 11 p.m. sounds like a good time to rumble.
Yeah. Let's meet in the parking lot and rumble.
Exactly. Yeah. They're supposed to be hanging. They hang out there. Let's go pick a fight. Hey, man, y'all want to fight?
Yeah.
Let's go fight.
So there used to be a place in Big Spring that was similar to this hangout. It was the box parking lot. And so there was a drag in Big Spring where like you'd go down to like the Sonic and you turn around and you cut back through and then you turn by the Wendy's, and then in the back of that Wendy's parking lot was an old grocery store that was called The Box. And it had a huge parking lot in front. I think it's a furniture store now, but you'd circle back around there and then you'd go back out and then you just do the drag. But if there was anybody that was going to fight, meet at the Box parking lot.
That's
and
right.
It's crazy how I remember being like at Sonic and everybody be hanging out, walking around their cars. Now they put police officers at Sonic. But back then,
Them dang loitering kids, man.
I know. Back then, we could kind of hang out and do what we wanted to do, but we were also giving them business at the same time. But I remember being there, and then someone would just pull up in a car, and they're like, "Hey, so-and-so's about to fight so-and-so in the Box parking lot." And everybody's like,
Yeah,
just
exactly.
trying to get
They're
down
like,
there.
what a fight. Let's go.
And then 7, 8 out of 10 times, everybody gets there, and everybody's like, "What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up?" Shake hands. Everybody leaves. No fight.
And you know what? That's fine.
Yeah, that's that's fine. It was like this huge build up to nothing happening. And I think from what I understood, this area, the Western Plaza parking lot, was a similar type situation. Like
Exactly.
a lot of times people would meet up there to fight and it would end up going nowhere.
Right. Plus, I mean, it's a known hangout for lots of different groups of teenagers.
Yeah.
So seems like a good guess. And so they show up and they're looking to start some trouble.
Yeah.
And Dustin goes straight into this, just right on the old classic. I'm going to take this giant yacht of a caddy.
Yep.
And I'm going to start corralling these people and trying to threaten them and drive at them. It says, of course, that a big fight did break out between like these two groups.
Yeah.
Which there was like dozens of people there.
Yeah. So the way that I understood the event unfolding is that Brian had been hanging out with his brother Jason, and they had been drinking, and that whether he was showing up to support his friends or if he had some sort of intention with these guys, some beef that was, still kind of, I don't know, left over from, some other weekend or something that's kind of still active. But Brian shows up over there with them, whether it's in defense of his friends or because he wants to give someone a piece. And they said they're outnumbered like 9 to 40 to 50 because there's like 5 guys and 4 girls is what I understood. And that there was 40 to 50 on the jock side. But that's where I kind of mentioned that I feel like some of those people are probably spectators, and it's boyfriends and girlfriends of people and spectators and things,
of course,
things like that where they're just going to watch. But one of the things that they pointed out about the punks is that they had weapons, that they showed up with weapons, and that they were out to do damage and destruction. Well, if it's 5 dudes against 30 dudes, if I'm there, I'm gonna have a weapon of some sort.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna show up and just get beat up.
Is this like a switchblade and like a wallet chain?
Yeah. Maybe some. No one got stabbed, but I would assume that some of these guys carry knives. I did hear that, the police baton or baton of some sort, the chains, chain with the lock on it. You can give someone a smiley and,
yes.
And so they had what they considered bats. I heard bats too. And that.
I'm definitely going to say a bat would qualify.
Yeah. And so this huge brawl like breaks out, but the punks are just overwhelmed by all the people that just start beating the crap out of them.
Right.
Like everybody in there basically one way or the other, because I know multiple people from both sides ended up at the hospital aside from everything else that happened. And a lot of the people jumped on the punks, and they kind of separated them off from the pack, and was just groups of people were just beating the crap out of them, is what I understand.
Yeah.
And Brian ended up in the fetal position on the ground, which in my opinion, if you got that many dudes swinging on you, you got to tuck.
I do know from experience that is exactly what you do.
Yes.
You just cover your ears, get in the fetal position, and wait for them to stop taking the boots to you.
Yeah. Hope that they get bored really soon.
Yeah, because it only gets worse.
Yeah, that's a fun story.
Yeah.
For another time. But so they said that Dustin, who, in my opinion, I have not heard from anybody or read anywhere that he was actively involved in this fight.
Yeah, so
And
what I saw is that all it says is that he retreated from the fight and got in his Cadillac.
okay.
And then that's when he drives away and then sharply turns back.
But the weird thing to me is that when he retreats back, one of the things I was thinking about is maybe that he wasn't directly involved in the fight is because Elsie and Rob, the two passengers that were in his car,
they're in there.
They're in the car. So
Right.
I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, were they just sitting in the car watching, and then he jumps in the car after
Or maybe
somebody swung a chain and hit him?
Or maybe, I mean, most of the time these acts of violence going on, especially at the school age, or fights at all, really, they don't go on very long.
Yeah, it's a couple minutes.
It's a couple minutes. So he probably, when they say retreats, I'm thinking he probably thought, we got to get out of here because
the cops are coming.
The cops are coming. Exactly.
Yeah, because back in the day, someone would always yell, "The cops are coming."
That's right.
When no, there's no cops.
And you know what?
And it's just funny to watch. Everybody's like,
it scatters, right?
Yeah.
It's like roaches. Yeah, everybody's like, oh, crap. And so I'm thinking it's something like that.
The cops are here, quick.
Exactly.
To my stepdad's pickup truck.
Yeah, exactly. Dun, dun, dun. And I think that's exactly what it is. He was probably like, oh, man, we got to split.
Yeah.
Because this is a lot. This is getting heavy quick. The cops are going to come here. Everybody can be getting in trouble.
Yeah, so he jumps in his car. Either way, jumps in his car. Rob and Elsie are in the car. Rob's in the front. Elsie's in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of leaving the parking lot, they say that he accelerates through the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this is when Chris gets clipped by the car.
Mm-hmm.
And they said he goes to the end of the parking lot. Instead of turning out, he circles back around.
Yeah, he whips a Yui.
Yeah. And then he starts accelerating to where, at this point, Brian is now fighting another guy or possibly two guys by himself. He's back up. He's on his feet. He's back in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And as the car starts coming for him, the other guy or guys peel off, which I would think that Dustin had the ability to decipher who was who based off of what they were wearing.
Yeah. And because it's dark out.
Yeah.
So it's December in Amarillo at 11 p.m. ish. I'm going to throw the ish on there.
Yeah.
So he's just seeing by headlight.
Yeah.
So he knows exactly who's in front of him.
And so he goes and accelerates towards Brian. And one of the things that they stated in the court documents is that he never let off the gas. They said he accelerated all the way through. Brian takes off and runs across the street, and now he's trying to go back, I would assume, towards that IHOP parking lot.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think the same.
There's a concrete median in the road, and so Brian makes it to about there. And Dustin hits him with his car. Like I said, he slaps the hood with his back. The motion of the vehicle plus the road suck him underneath the car. Mm-hmm. He bounces over Brian and the median, I would assume, around the same time, because when they found Brian, he was laid up in that area by a pile of snow.
Right.
And so it's cold outside.
Mm-hmm.
And he jumps that curb, takes off, and then that's when everybody, Rob and Elsie, are in the car, and they're like, holy crap. I can't believe this happened. And Elsie was even quoted as saying, like, hey, what if he's dead? And then that's where, what was he said, I bet he liked that one.
Yeah, he said, first he said, I'm a ninja in my caddy.
Yeah. And that's just a total just garbage line too. Where like, I think people thought that was fake in the movie where he's like, I'm a ninja in my caddy. You're not, how is that even, that on face value, that doesn't work. Ninjas don't use caddies.
No.
Ninjas don't drive cars.
It doesn't. Yeah. So it says, he exclaims, I'm a ninja in my caddy. And then after he runs over and speeds away, he says, I bet he liked that one.
Yeah. And so you would have to make the assumption that he knew exactly what was happening when it happened. And there wasn't much talk about when Elsie said, what if he's dead? And one of the things that I didn't mention in part one is because I really wanted to break this down, is that they said when Brian was run over by Dustin, He was traveling at anywhere between 45 and 50 miles per hour.
I mean, in an 83 Caddy.
Yeah.
So his foot was on the accelerator for a minute.
Yeah. Think about if you saw someone going 25 miles through a parking lot. You'd be like, hey,
slow down.
that guy needs to slow down. He's going to kill somebody out here.
Good point. That's so true. This is an 83 Cadillac. That engine's screaming.
Yeah.
If he's accelerating through a parking lot at that speed, like everybody can hear that car coming.
Yes. And he is just, and he mows him over.
Yeah, he does.
And, another correction. So, whenever he hits him, he goes underneath the car. I said later on that cops were able to, is that my dog?
That's Rosie. Yeah.
All right. Well, they said that the cops were able to find the blood splatter under the car, and it's not blood splatter. It's blood spatter.
That's correct. Yeah. When you're referring to it in a forensic sense, it's considered spatter.
Yes. So I apologize for that. When I get rolling, I say what I'm going to say. But listen, we got to speak truth.
Hey, you know what?
We got to get the verbiage right.
Let me just tell you like this. There's someone out there that listens religiously. Mm-hmm. And he won't miss a chance to let me know that something needs to be corrected. So holler to my boy.
Yeah, and he's a good dude. Not only that, but we welcome that.
That's right.
Yeah, we say like if there's something like when someone messaged me, it was like, "Hey, you misplaced these." I'm like, "No, let me know. That way we can correct it."
Absolutely. Yeah, so, I have no problem with it at all.
Yeah. So Brian is run over and Dustin speeds off with everybody in his vehicle, with two people in their vehicle. He later drops them off at home, tells them, hey, don't think about anything. Meanwhile, just like, hey,
never mind the fact that I just crushed a student in my car.
Yeah. And meanwhile, Brian is back laying either in the roadway or
dying,
parking lot dying. And they stated that he was still alive for a few moments after this. And what was crazy to me is that witnesses at the scene stated that they recalled hearing a cheer whenever Brian was run over.
That's sick,
and
man.
That to me just says it really kind of puts out there like what the opinion of these other kids were to the majority of the people around them.
Yeah. And
I think that is really sad that based off of someone's appearance only, and maybe some trouble that you've had with them based off of the feuds that you had going on, that you would cheer when someone was run over by a car. That is one of those things where I think no matter what group you're in, you would think you would make a claim that life is precious, that life has meaning. But I think that it's safe to say that even right now, when you're talking about current issues, past issues, depending on what side you're on, different people have different values of what you feel like someone's life is worth.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Where is most people would say, oh, no, life is precious, life is valuable. Mm-hmm. Then when you start breaking things down into different subjects or different areas of topics of conversation, then we get to, well, certain life has different value.
Okay, sure.
And what I mean by that specifically, without going in, because we don't like to talk about politics, but just to give you an example, you could say abortion, and then you could talk about the death penalty, and you could assign different values,
of course,
based off of those things. And I don't want to get too deep into that because I think that'll take us down a slippery slope that I don't want to get into.
It is a slippery slope, yeah.
But what I'm saying is that when they cheered when he was run over, they obviously had a different idea of what his value was.
I would imagine at this point in their lives, they probably deeply regret that. And if they don't, then they're a dirt person anyway.
Yeah, they're a dirt bag. But I think a lot of people do look back on that and go, geez, that got out of hand.
Yeah, just because you're beefing with somebody, I mean, obviously in a couple of years, they're going to try to distance themselves as far as they can from that entire incident. But I mean, like the immature, like high school, like conflict and stuff. But the fact that they cheered that somebody got ran over, that's messed up.
Yeah. And then his brother, Jason, runs over there. Brian's brother, Jason, runs over there. and basically gets Brian in his arms, and they're trying to figure out. And then if you listen to the last episode, I talked about all his injuries, which were severe.
Yeah.
He had a lot of severe injuries, as you would expect.
I mean, he got pancaked by an 83 Cadillac that's moving at that rate of speed that had to jump a median, and he was caught somewhere in the middle of that. That's so much weight and so much force.
Crushing down.
Yeah,
Well, the initial hit is going to be a tremendous amount of force. That's probably where he broke his back, and I believe they said he severed his spine somewhere in there.
Yeah. And then he gets pulled under because of the way the car is bouncing over this median, and then gets crushed. I mean, your body is like a well-baked potato with under that much force. And I hate to say it in a way that evokes laughter, but that's just so much force.
Yeah.
You have no chance to survive that.
No.
That's why if you did survive, it would be considered miraculous, because your body's like a sponge.
Yeah.
At that point, it just smushed it.
And that's why I was saying I think that those last bits of adrenaline that were coursing through his body is what probably kept him alive for those moments after. And they said that he was trying to say something, but they couldn't understand what he was trying to say. And right there is when, I think at this point, like the girls that were there, I think one of the girls that was there was Brian's girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
His brother's there. And then his best friend, Chris, is there among these other people. And I apologize if I left somebody out. I just don't know who those people are.
Of course, I don't either.
But he dies right there in front of them.
Yeah, it's tragic.
And then you get to where, okay, now this event has happened. So what's next? Like, what's the next step? Well, obviously, somebody has to
get the police involved.
Yeah, somebody has to get the police involved, and they do. And one of the things is one of the investigators on the case was Rudy Montano.
How about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was like, hey, I know that guy.
I know that guy as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was one of the investigators on the case, and it is said that they pretty well knew from the get-go that this was very much intentional.
Yeah.
Because the two witnesses in the car were told by Dustin, like, hey, y'all forget about this. I did this by myself. No need to involve yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they went home.
How selfless.
Yeah. And they went home, and they were not able to sit on this very long.
No. How could you?
Yeah. They went and told their parents what happened. And it's even said that Dustin told his parents what happened, and his dad, also Mike, told him that they would figure it out in the morning. And so I'm like, boy, I'm like, Dad, some things I know if I would have went, I'm like, Dad, some things happened tonight, and things got out of control, and I accidentally ran this kid over with my car. Because originally he said that he was driving through the parking lot trying to leave, and Brian slipped in the snow and fell, and he accidentally ran him over. That was the story in the beginning.
And you know what? Let's even take that story at face value. Your kid tells you that, and you're just like, we'll deal with it in the morning.
Okay, well, get you a good night's rest.
That's right.
And,
it's late. I mean, it's after 11, so it's we're somewhere between 11 and mid.
Yeah.
You know what? I still got a little Sandman I'm dealing with. Holler at me in the morning. We'll deal with this. That sounds crazy to me.
That sounds really crazy to me that the response would be, we'll deal with it in the morning.
In any scenario in which somebody is ran over, I'm going to be like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, what'd you say?
You said you ran someone over? Where is this person? Take me there immediately.
Yeah, or we need to involve the police or something. And that, to me, like, I understand you want to protect your kid. And that may have been something for him, is that he was trying to figure out a way that, because in the research I read, they said that that Dustin went home that night and went to sleep. Some people have even said he went home and slept like a baby. He did all. I don't think it's safe to say that. No. I don't think we can assume what his emotions were when he went home that night, not giving him any sort of credibility that he was in some way a good guy. I don't know him. I just know what he did. And I think that it may have been him and his dad trying to figure out how to spin a narrative. Sure. It could have been the fact that his dad really was like, hey, I'm going to bed. I'm not dealing with this right now. And you and your friends and all your bullcrap and all your stuff. And he goes back to bed, and his wife's like, what happened? And he's like, he said he ran somebody over, but you know how kids are. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know how they lie. And Elsie and Rob are at this point, at some time in this point, they're on the way to the police station with their parents.
Right.
And the cops already know that this incident happened because they've gone out there to investigate it. And Brian was dead at the scene. And so they are now working this as a homicide, presumably. I don't know in the beginning.
Right.
But they have witnesses at the scene that said that he was intentionally run over. So I would assume that's what it was. But when Elsie and Rob get up to the police station, they tell him what's going on. And Elsie has this, she actually has a conscience. And she tells the police everything that was said inside the car, what the responses were, what the actions were, the feelings that were going on. You know, they asked her if they thought Dustin looked like he was in distress or that he was in fear of his life or any of these things that you could actually look at and say, okay, this might have been a reason why he did it.
Where's his state of mind?
Yeah, what was his state of mind? But none of that was there.
That's right.
She said he was calm and he looked like he was very intentful as to what he was doing.
Right, yeah. Focused.
Yeah, focused. And so at this point, 6 a.m., I believe is what they said.
Yeah.
They go to Dustin's house, rap on the door, and they're like, you're under arrest for the murder of Brian Deneke. And in the original arrest, he was arrested for murder.
That's right.
Now, that's not exactly how it goes when they get to trial. And that's one of the things that I wanted to spend some time and talk about. But I know that trials are messy.
Very, because what's important is that he was picked up and prosecuted for first-degree murder.
Yep.
But a lot of different circumstances would, as we know now, of course, reduce that greatly.
Yeah, and so and like I said, this trial doesn't take place for a year and a half after the incident. So he's allowed to graduate from high school and do all the different stuff. And I don't know what happened to his football career. I would assume it went into the toilet.
Or there wasn't one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think they kind of was like, hey, this senior year, you're going to sit this one out. And when they get to trial, this is when a lot of this siding still happens. You have a group of people that say, look at this kind of all-American boy football player. He's got his future ahead of him. Life's heading in the right direction. He made a mistake. He accidentally killed somebody. And then they look at the person that he killed. And I think there was a little bit of a bias even in the jury pool.
Yes, I'm going to say absolutely.
And if it's one of those things where the prosecution, and I'm reading now from that Texas Monthly article, but the prosecution stated that they would present compelling evidence against Dustin that he had never applied his brakes or turned his steering wheel as his Cadillac approached Brian, and that he fled the scene of the crime and he lied to the police. And then his attorney, whose name was Warren Clark, painted this picture of Brian that was in a way that it was his attorney was, I guess you could say he was good at his job, but a total douche in the way that he did it. And he said, quote, "Ladies and gentlemen, a persuasive orator who favors dark suits and theatrical flourishes. This is not a case of diversity or tolerance or judging people by the way that they dress. This case is about a gang of young men who chose a lifestyle designated to intimidate those around them, to challenge authority, and to provoke a reaction from others." End quote. Clark would contend that the punks brought bats and chains with them out to Western Street, and a conspiracy was put into play to kill and maim these high school students. His client, he argued, had no other option but to protect the life of his friends, whom he suggested Brian was beating. Dustin had no time to think or ponder. He had to take immediate action, and he took it. And if he had to live it over again, Clark said, meaningfully fixing his gaze on the jury, he would do it again.
Wow.
Yeah. So he goes in there, and there's a lot there. He says a lot of negative things about Brian.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, he completely trashes him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just kind of a little piece of it, just to kind of give you the insight of what he was, like the way that he was setting this up.
Mm-hmm.
And so originally, like the DA's office said, Dustin lied because he said, oh, he slipped in the snow and I ran him over. Now, all of a sudden, we've turned the story where he's protecting his friends.
Of course, yeah, because all these punks were, just that little handful of them was just going to destroy this entire gang of jocks.
Yeah. And that it was even kind of, they brought up the fact that Brian had it coming based on the lifestyle that he lived.
Wow.
That there was no other outcome, whether it be now or later on down the road, that something like this would happen to him based off of his lifestyle. It's his fault that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And Dustin was just looking out for his buddies and doing the right thing. And the thing that didn't work out for him is I believe Elsie testified against him.
That's right.
And so the jury had a good idea of what was going on, but they decided to do something, I think, that was a little bit strange.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I say that it gets kind of messy, because you and I were talking about this earlier, where we were talking about the murder versus the manslaughter.
That's right.
And to murder someone, you're intentionally, knowingly causing the death of that person.
Right.
Manslaughter is reckless.
Recklessly, yeah.
So the jury was given the option of a lesser included, is the way that I feel like this was set up.
Yeah, I think that's correct, because whatever happened, he was put on trial for first-degree murder, but I guess the jury decided that the elements of that particular offense were not met with all the evidence that they had, and mainly because his defense attorney just criminalized the victim.
Yep.
Which, of course, is disgusting, and I hate that, but unfortunately, it's just part of our criminal justice system.
Yeah, that's going to literally happen to anybody.
That's his job, and you don't have to like it. I know I don't like it. I think it's gross and greasy and slimy and so a couple other things that I'm not going to say or I'm going to get bleeped. But I'm just saying, but it is his job, and that's what he's trying to do. And so he does a good enough job, because with the evidence, it's obvious. He even has a person who was in his vehicle with him, who he considered a friend, saying he did it on purpose. I seen him.
I seen him run the guy over, basically laugh about it, talk about how he's an ninja.
And then took me and just dropped me off at home.
Yeah.
Right. And so he ends up getting voluntary manslaughter. And that's still manslaughter. He still killed somebody. And that's
recklessly killed somebody.
Yeah. And you know what? To a way, it is like that. Does it make sense totally? No. Recklessly is a good word to describe what happened in that parking lot altogether, in my opinion. But that's not the part that actually gets me the most. It's his penalty.
Yeah.
For that offense, which is next to nothing.
Yeah, and I think going back to that jury, and maybe in the jury room, they might have been thinking to themselves, did he know that by hitting him with his car, he was going to cause his death? Intentionally, knowingly causing someone's death. In my opinion, yes.
I'm going to say yes.
When you're running 50 miles an hour and you run somebody, intentionally leave the parking lot into the roadway to run somebody over, you have to know that that person has a high probability of dying.
Unless they wanted to go on the record and say that the person driving the car was just a total idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for all I didn't see anything like that, but they were like, hey, he just doesn't have the mental capacity to know that.
That's basically what it feels like to me. Is that actually what happened? No, I'm just saying that's the only way I could come to the conclusion that somebody would be like, it's not like he didn't know, it's not like he knew it was going to kill him. And I'm like, what?
And ignorance of the law is not a defense.
Yeah, that's right.
But that doesn't matter if you get into it gets down to the jury, and then you give them that outlet of a lesser included. So it's, in our opinion, I think both of our opinions, I think you had enough to have the intentionally, knowingly causing the death of him, which would be murder.
I do think that, yeah.
The jury did not see it that way for whatever reason. and they chose to go with the manslaughter.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, they come back and they're like, this is a kid with a bright future, and we don't want to mess that up, and so we're going to give him probation. And we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, and a $10,000 fine.
And a $10,000 fine that later got waived.
Yeah, that he also didn't have to pay.
Due to good behavior. And
yeah, great.
This is, what were the prerequisites to he had a future?
Exactly.
That's what I want to know. If the requirement was because he used to play football and then he graduated from high school, and then you don't really know anybody's future past what you've got.
Yeah, it's
right there.
It's not like he was graduating at 15.
Yeah.
He was just a normal kid for all intents and purposes.
He had a Division I scholarship to some school or something, which he didn't have.
No.
He had nothing more than the average, you and I, anybody listening to it, like, we graduated from high school and then we went on and did what we were going to do. That's basically what he had. So
exactly.
if that was the bright future everybody was looking at,
they should have just said he had a future.
Yeah.
Because bright future, no. And we'll come to find out that's exactly right, because it's not like he didn't, I don't know, end up in prison anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, he just didn't screw all that off. But for him, he screws it off just drinking with his buddies.
Drinking underage.
Yeah, which says to me, nothing changed.
Yeah, that's exactly how I'm feeling.
He was the same kid that he was. And I know we're talking about he's 17 years old. And you mentioned, or while we were talking about that may have played into,
of course, not
only him supposedly having a bright future, but the fact that when this happened, he was 17.
He was 17, right? Yeah. So he wasn't legally an adult, but he was old enough to go to big boy jail.
Yeah.
Which he did, but he wasn't an adult. And so that was probably considered like, hey, he's still a juvenile. He's just a big dumb idiot that hit somebody with a car, but he didn't mean to.
He didn't mean to do it.
Right.
So that, and he ended up going to prison. So that, I guess there's some silver lining there, but no one is restored from something like this. And I know that it still plays a huge part in a lot of people's lives in this community to this day. And one of the things that I'd like to announce, hopefully if I can get it all going, after I recorded the podcast, I reached out. I didn't know if Chris would remember who I was, but I reached out to him and I asked him if he'd be willing to sit down and do an interview based off of everything that happened. And he said he would.
Oh, sweet.
So I'm going to try to set that up hopefully soon so that we can tie it all in together. And that, because he was there.
Right.
And that would be the best way for us to kind of put aside some of the other things that we heard and we'd get it straight from the horse's mouth.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah. And so hopefully that all pans out and it works out and he can come on the show and kind of explain everything that happened. And the way that I told him is that it's uncut, unedited. He could say whatever he wants.
Sure.
So I'm just giving everybody a heads up that if it is graphic or if there's language or anything, everything stays. Mm-hmm. The whole thing as it's recorded stays in there.
Yeah, I like that.
And so
genuine,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be a cool deal. And getting into the part where he screwed his probation up and went to prison, I've already gone over that, so I don't think we have to dive too much.
Nah.
We don't have to dive into that. Let's just hope that interview comes through. I hope it does. I was going to save that for later as an announcement, but as we're talking about, I was like, what a perfect way to tie this all together.
No, I agree.
And so hopefully we can get that done. But I think for this episode, it was already kind of bad enough as it is, and it happened in the town that we live in, and it's kind of, I know people are sided up, and we're not trying to tell people one way or the other. Listen, I know everybody's got their opinions on how because I know this might stir up maybe some tension between some people we know, but we wanted to bring it to you anyway.
Of course. And what I do know, regardless of what school you grew up in, city, state, province, whatever, nothing that happens in high school is worth killing somebody over.
No.
No beef you have in high school is worth killing somebody over.
No.
Especially if it's because of the way they look or act. If it ain't hurting you, if it ain't bothering you, if it ain't breaking a law, why don't you just mind your own dang business?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the world needs a whole lot more of that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I mentioned in the part 1 is that you judging someone based off their appearance. I have friends that are still in this punk scene to this day.
Same.
Great dudes. Like you're pushing away a potentially good relationship that you could have with somebody based off of nothing.
That's right.
Literally just the way that one of the funnest times I ever had is when my buddy Ryan drugged me to this punk show that was in this small bar over down by 6th Street. And I was totally out of my element. It was right after I had surgery on my hip, and I was in there on my crutches, and some dude that was in there that was like dressed exactly like this when I walked in got out of his seat, and he's like, "Hey bro, sit down.
Yeah.
I can see you're injured." I mean, you're judging people based off of nothing.
Yeah. Everyone has a right to self-expression. Like I said, if it ain't hurting nobody, if it ain't breaking a law, why does it even matter to you?
Yeah, why do you care?
Yeah,
why does
back off.
Yeah.
Go find something to do, man.
Yeah.
Go play Call of Duty and yell at a 10-year-old.
Exactly.
You know?
There you go.
Damn.
Go grab you some Fortnite or something.
There you go.
And yeah, just if you have that much spare time to literally just dive into somebody else's life that you don't know and nitpick everything they do, you need to get a hobby.
Yeah, you need to do a little more soul searching. You need to find Jesus. That's what you need.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we'll leave it right there for this episode. Hopefully, we can get that interview set up, and I'll keep you guys updated on that. Whether when it's supposed to come through. Hopefully, pretty soon. But we're gonna leave it right there for this episode. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Murder Project. We appreciate everyone. Our numbers are going up, our downloads are going up, and we have you guys to thank for that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you're looking for us on any of the social media platforms, you can find us on Facebook. We're at The Murder Project. If you need to search for us, we're at facebook.com/podcasttmp. Don't forget also, you can find us now. Our podcast is on Facebook. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody to listen to us. They don't have an excuse now because
they don't
have a platform.
Listen to it, like it.
I'm not going to tell you again. If you're looking for us on Instagram, we are at The Murder Project. And if you're looking for us on Twitter, we are at The Murder Pod. Also, don't forget, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on any of the platforms that you're listening on. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please go and hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review and hit that 5 stars.
Let me get them 5 stars.
Give them to us, please. And we'd really appreciate that. So thank you to everyone that has already done that. If you'd like to drop us an email, you can reach us at contact@themurderproject.com. And as always, Mike or myself will get back to you. That's going to do it for this episode of The Murder Project. We look forward to speaking to you guys again soon. But before I go, please remember,
head up, eyes up,
and stay alive.